All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us today. So before we get started, I just wanted to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Adina Glincher, and I will be your training facilitator today. I also have my colleague Juanita on the line. She may be chiming in. I am a senior HR advisor here at PayEntry. And prior to beginning the presentation, I always like to start by letting you all know that I am not an attorney, so nothing I tell you here today should be construed as legal advice. If you have any questions that involve your attorney or you want to reach out to a legal team, please do so separately. And if you have any questions about the content of the training today, please do not hesitate to reach out to our team at hrservices@payentry.com. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about our Q&A session at the end. It will look a little different today because we're going to be going through a lot of information. So we do ask that if you have any specific questions to your company or your state, that you do send us the question via email rather than putting it in the presentation today as a question. All right, so before we begin, the information provided in the webinar today is not an all-inclusive list of all federal and state updates. We would be here for many hours if that were the case, and none of us have that time in our day. So we're gonna just highlight a few things, a few updates that are changing, what we felt was important to share. And like I said, any additional questions, please do reach out to us. Reach out to your dedicated HR professional for specific questions about your state. And if you do not have a dedicated HR professional, you can always contact us at that same email address to learn more about PayEntry HR services. All right, so why are we here today? Today we are doing a 2022 mid-year compliance review. And you will see that we have two handouts in our handout section today. They are both exactly the same. We just wanted to make sure that they uploaded correctly, so we uploaded double. So feel free to follow along via the handouts of the slides, and there will be a lot of information on there, so make sure you download a copy. All right, so first we're going to talk about some federal updates that will apply to everybody. Then we're going to go into some state updates. So of course, depending on what state you operate in, this may or may not apply to you. We're going to go through some state and local minimum wage changes, talk about paid family leave and disability a little bit, family medical leave, paid sick leave. We're going to talk through some state retirement program requirements. Of course, what would be a webinar in 2022 without touching on COVID-19? And we're going to end our presentation today discussing hot topics and a brief Q&A session if we have some time. So we're going to get straight into it, into the federal updates. So first and foremost, this was first announced in March of 2020 and updated again in March of 2021. The I-9 remote document inspection flexibility has now been extended through October 31st, 2022. What does this mean? Employees who work exclusively in a remote setting due to COVID-19, this would be applying to them. Employees are temporarily exempt from the physical inspection requirements until they undertake non-remote employment on a regular, consistent, or predictable basis, or the extension is terminated. So it's important to note that when this first came out, this flexibility only applied to businesses that were 100% remote. That is no longer the case. This applies to any employee who operates 100% remotely. There is this flexibility associated with checking those I-9 documents. So more to come after October 31st as to whether or not this is extended. And then effective May 1st, 2022, employers are no longer permitted to accept expired Form I-9 List B documents. So going through the pandemic when things were a little crazy and DMVs and other places were closed or there were long wait times, there was the ability to accept some expired documents from List B. That is no longer, as of May 1st, 2022, that is no longer the case because document issuing authorities have reopened and or provided alternatives to in-person renewals. And there will be a new I-9 form coming soon. You can expect changes and revisions because the current one is set to expire October 31st of this year. Some of the proposed changes include compressing sections 1 and 2 from 2 pages to 1 page to reduce paper use, and moving section 3 to a separate re-verification and rehire supplement, making it standalone so it's not included in the regular I-9, and then updating the list of acceptable documents as well. So definitely keep an eye out for the new I-9. And it's always important that you are revisiting and auditing your Form I-9, especially given the challenges that may have occurred during the COVID-19 pandemic and the proposed changes. And if you want to take advantage of our services for an I-9 audit, that is something we offer through our HR services package as well. All right, moving on to wage and hour compliance. So the Department of Labor will likely issue a new independent contractor rule. So under the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA, employees are entitled to minimum wage, overtime pay, and other benefits, and independent contractors are not. So this classification is very important. And many of you probably operate in states where your state has their own independent contractor rules and classification requirements. So now there is a proposal for federally there to be an update and a change. So some factors to consider include the control over the work being performed, the individual's investment in facilities and equipment, that could be financial investment, the permanency of the independent contractor relationship, the skills or expertise required by the individual, as well as whether the work is part of an integrated unit of production. And then the proposed overtime rule is expected in October 2022. So the proposed overtime rule will clarify exempt classification of employees, and it's likely going to increase the exempt salary requirement under the FLSA. So what does that mean? So not only are there factors to consider, such as the list above on the top of the screen, as to whether or not somebody is an independent contractor, but there's also a minimum salary threshold, as many of us know. That is currently $35,568 federally. Some states may have higher ones. There are talks, none of us know, we don't have a crystal ball, but there are talks that will go and increase as high as $47,000 annually. I've even heard $62,000 and $80,000 annually. So more to come as to what that will be increased to, but it's important to evaluate your exempt employee salaries if there is an increase to make sure they still qualify. Next is the mileage rate increase. So many of you are probably already made aware, as this went into effect July 1st, 2022. On June 9th, 2022, the IRS issued an increase for the optional standard mileage rate from 58.5 cents a mile to 62.5. And like I mentioned, this new rate went into effect on July 1st and will be in effect through December 31st, 2022, if not longer. There is only one instance when an employer is federally required to pay mileage reimbursement to employees, and you'll see we bolded that federally required because we're going to get into some state requirements as well. And that is when failure to do so will mean that their earnings dip below the minimum wage. So it's important that no one receives below that federal minimum wage. And then many states require mileage reimbursement in other instances. Employers continue to have the option to use other methods to calculate the actual cost of employees using their own vehicle rather than using that standard mileage rate. You don't have to use the IRS rate if you have a different way of calculating the actual cost. And states such as California, Illinois, and Massachusetts, and more have passed their own laws regarding mileage reimbursement. So if you're in one of those states, make sure that you are looking into that law as well. All right. The Crown Act. So this one's a pretty big one. A lot of states are updating this. The Crown Act prohibits discrimination against a person based on their natural hairstyle, their hair texture, and protective hairstyles. And then here is a list of protective hairstyles for you all to see. The U.S. House of Representatives passed the bill at the federal level, which means that if it is approved by the Senate and the President, its protection would automatically apply to all 50 states. So in the meantime, the states listed on the right side of the screen all have implemented their own Crown Act statewide. And you'll see that Louisiana recently did. It will go into effect August 1st, and then Alaska is still pending governor's signature. So why do we care? Well, it's important that as an employer, you are considering reviewing some of your policies and procedures for verbiage and practice updates. That may be your EEO anti-harassment policy, your dress code policy, etc. So definitely work with your HR professional to make sure that your policies are compliant with this. And then state minimum wage increases is our next topic. So July, I think it's the new January. There's a lot happening, and not only will there be minimum wage updates currently, but again, at the end of the year, or the beginning of the new year, I should say, we'll probably see a lot more. So definitely join us for that presentation come the new year. So currently, as of July 1st, Connecticut, the District of Columbia, Nevada, and Oregon all have minimum wage rate updates. You can see them listed. And then more to come this year as well. Florida's minimum wage will increase to $11 an hour on September 30th, and Hawaii's minimum wage will increase to $12 an hour on October 1st. And just when you thought it couldn't get any more complicated, there are local minimum wage increases. So you will all see that the states on here are primarily California. We have a few Illinois as well. So, California, Emeryville goes up to $17.68. I think that may be the largest minimum wage I've seen. So keep this in mind. If you operate in any of these jurisdictions, it's important that you are aware of these updates. And if you do not, then make sure you're looking into your jurisdictions to make sure there are not any local minimum wage updates where you're located. And like I said, a copy of the slides is available to you under the handout section, so no need to jot all of this down. It will be available. Next, we have paid family leave. And I do want to state that in every state, paid family leave and the definition of that differs a little bit. So once again, make sure you're referring to your state's law. For example, in California, paid family leave, although the title is paid family leave, is not actually a leave. It is a wage compensation similar to disability insurance, which is why we have that listed a few times on this slide, available to employees to bond with a new child or for a variety of reasons. Paid family leave, though, in many of the states listed is actually paid time off as well. So once again, state specific. What is paid family leave? It is insurance funded through employee paid payroll taxes. Some are also partially funded by employer paid payroll taxes. Paid family leave in this instance provides paid time off for employees to bond with a new child, care for a family member, participate in qualifying event because of a family member's military deployment, leave for their own serious health condition, and safe leave as well. And then, of course, eligible reasons vary by state. Generally, paid family medical leave, which we're going to get into on the next slide, gives 12 weeks of unpaid time off to employees. Some states, like I mentioned, this falls under their paid family leave category. I know they sound very similar. I'm confusing myself as I speak. So none of these are actually updates as of July 1st, but we just wanted to help clarify the difference between the two. So leaves such as the CFRA in California, the Colorado Family Care Act, the Vermont Parental and Family Leave, all these are leaves. Some of them are 12 weeks off of work, some of them are 16, depending on the circumstances and the state. And then you can see on the right-hand column is how many employees you need to have at your business in order to qualify or fall under this leave category. All right, clear as mud, right? All right, so now a category many of us are familiar with is paid sick leave. So you can see that we bolded the New Mexico row here because that is the big update as of July 1st, 2022, is that New Mexico now has a paid sick leave requirement. Many of these states, actually almost all of the states on this slide have already had one in place, but we wanted you to be aware. And then you can see that certain states, paid sick leave is required if employers have a certain amount of employees, such as Connecticut, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, etc. Some of these paid sick leave laws also include safe time or safe leave, which may be leave for reasons like domestic violence or stalking, and then also COVID-19 reasons as well. And then max usage, accruals, and qualifying reasons will vary by state. So make sure you're reaching out to us after the presentation if you have clarifying questions. All right, a common topic that keeps getting brought up is this state-run retirement program. So as many of you know, many states are now requiring that employers offer retirement programs. California, as of June 30th, 2022, said that any employer with 5 or more employees must make this available to their employees. Colorado is implementation is expected to begin October of this year. Connecticut is effective this month, and so on and so forth. So definitely, if you fall into one of these states, make sure you are researching into this retirement program requirement. And then you'll see that in some states, it is either voluntary, still pending, or has been postponed. So more to come in those states. And we do have a retirement program here at PayEntry. So that is a service we offer in addition to payroll and HR and in the other services. We do offer a retirement department as well. So if you don't have a retirement program and you are interested in having one, or you are in a state where it is required, we highly recommend you reach out to us or your client advocate to get additional information on that. All right, so I said it would not be a webinar in 2022 without mentioning COVID-19. So as many of you are aware, the FFCRA, or the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, expired September 30th, 2021. There's currently no federal requirement to provide paid leave. Of course, we'll get into the next slide on the state requirements. CDC guidelines have updated and continue to update, so make sure that you are checking out the CDC website. Quarantine and isolation is based on an employee's vaccination status, and the quarantine average is at least 5 days, tends to be the trend. And consider updating existing policies. So as of January 2022, it is no longer required for employers with 100 or more employees to have a vaccination policy. So that was a big change. Make sure that if you decide to continue to mandate vaccinations, that you are allowing for medical and religious exemptions, because that is required. And then accommodations and leave in place of FFCRA. So although there is no federal requirement, it may still fall under ADA depending on the circumstance. So make sure you're considering accommodations and leave. And then an update we actually just received this week as well is that employers are required to assess whether the current pandemic circumstances and individual workplace circumstances justify viral screen testing. So the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, made it clear that this new update is not announcing whether testing is or is not warranted. They are leaving it up to the individual employer. So that is new as of this week. And then, of course, we go into the states with COVID-19 related leave laws, and you'll see a lot of these look just like the paid sick leave laws, because a lot of them fall under that category. States such as California, Colorado, and New York have separate COVID leave requirements. So definitely, if you're in one of those states, reach out to your HR professional or do some research into those. And then localities may have their own requirements as well. And just a reminder to update your paid sick leave policies, whether COVID related or not. They are constantly being updated. Even since we put together this presentation, there have been updates. So make sure that you are really, I would say an entire handbook update is probably warranted at least once a year and potentially twice a year, depending on the state you operate in. So some other hot topics that we wanted to touch on, mental health. So we probably keep hearing this, and I think we've been hearing this and we'll continue to hear mental health in the HR world and in our workplace. New FMLA mental health resources are available that enable employees to take time off for mental health treatment. So something to consider if you fall under the FMLA requirements. Mental health days. Many of the articles I keep reading mention mental health days. So these are generally offered separately from vacation and sick leave, and they are their own category. So maybe consider offering mental health days to your employees and an employee assistance program or an EAP program. If you don't have one of these, it may be something to consider offering. And a lot of health insurance companies or brokers, they offer this alongside health insurance. So it's an employee assistance program is a resource available to employees. Generally, they offer, counseling or different type of resources, maybe financial resources, etc., for employees who may be going through a difficult time. Bereavement leave. So we did want to touch on this as well. Many states, more than listed on this slide actually, have bereavement leave mandatory requirements in their states. So California recently reintroduced the idea of mandatory bereavement leave, and Illinois has passed it, the law. So effective January 1st, 2023, it will be extending their bereavement leave law. So just things to keep in mind as well. And then remote work is still very much a thing. So consider the employee reimbursement laws in your state. 11 states have laws around reimbursing employees for necessary work-related expenses. And California and Illinois, which appear to be the two states we keep talking about, have specific laws around remote work, such as internet access and phone bills. And then with remote work comes this category of privacy and productivity. So New York requires electronic monitoring notices effective May 7th of this year. So that's just one of the privacy and productivity laws that have passed, and there are more. Pay transparency. So for those of you who don't know what pay transparency is, pay transparency is when all job postings are required to state the hourly rate or salary and a general description of all benefits and other compensation offered with the job. So in November of 2020, Colorado redirected the course of pay transparency laws within the US. They're kind of the ones who started that. And you can see on this slide, Washington has this going to effect January 1st, 2023. New York passed on June 3rd. It's pending governor's signature. And then California, Connecticut, Maryland, Nevada, Rhode Island, Washington also have or are considering laws that require employers to provide salary ranges to candidates. And then employee handbook policies to revisit. I think we should have just listed all of them, but we try to keep it concise. If you don't already have one in place, definitely implement a religious accommodation policy or consider implementing one. Updating your EEO and anti-harassment policy based on the Crown Act and some other hot topics. Your paid sick leave policies, which we talked about, in your leave of absences policies, especially if you're in a state that recently passed a new leave of absence requirement or lowered the employee threshold count for that. And then, as many of you know, Roe versus Wade overturned. So how that will affect your business, I think it's more to come. It's going to depend on your state and what laws are passing in the upcoming future. But consider your benefit plans, travel costs as medical expenses, and workplace discrimination when considering some of the changes that you may decide to implement moving forward. All right, so we just threw a ton of information at you in the 25 minutes we've been here together. So let us help. If you are completely overwhelmed or haven't heard of half the things we spoke about, definitely reach out to us. And if you have heard of all of them and you just have clarifying questions or would like an HR professional dedicated to your business to assist you, definitely reach out as well. We're here to help you with all state and federal law updates. We can help update or create employee handbooks for our clients, help keep you up with changing state and federal laws and your compliance, help with day-to-day HR best practices, forms, policies, and more. In addition, our HR services compliance package includes a learning management system that contains a broad array of employee and manager trainings, including compliant harassment prevention training. So we are not just throwing this information at you and wishing you good luck. We are here to support you through every step of the way. All right. Now let's go to our question box. I know most of the questions will probably come via email, but let's see if we have any questions that would pertain to the group. All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so either we will have quite the influx in our email, or I've just confused everybody, or maybe you're all set up and ready to move forward with these things on your own. So no questions. Make sure you join us for our next webinar. It is 2 weeks from today on Thursday, August 4th, and we will be discussing how to manage time off requests. And then make sure you visit us at payentry.com/webinars to view our webinar schedule and sign up for future webinars. I just received 2 questions that I would love to address in front of the group. I've never heard of a Form I-9. Who's required to file it? That is an amazing question. Every employee in the United States is required to have a Form I-9. So it is verification of their identity and their ability to work in the US. If you haven't heard of a Form I-9, definitely shoot us an email, and we are more than happy to walk you through what that is and how we can help you be compliant in that aspect. That is one of the #1 things audited. So it's important that you have your I-9s completed. And is there a cost for HR services? Great question. There is. Our cost is, in my opinion, pretty affordable. It is $8 per employee per month. With a $200 minimum. So if you have less than 25 employees, you are paying $200 a month for a dedicated HR professional. We can help you with all things related to HR. It includes e-posters for your remote employees. It includes our learning management system, unlimited access to your HR professional, to discuss employee relations or any questions you have, and to help you with your state compliance. And then the only other fee associated with our service is a $350 initial audit fee, because we do start our service with a compliance audit to determine what some priority items are that we can start working on together and develop a 12-month plan. So if you have further questions or you're interested in signing up, definitely reach out to us. All right, I received more questions. I love it. Let's see. Do all employees have to complete the new I-9 or just new incoming employees? That is a great question. To my knowledge, it does not have to be redone just because the form is updating. Generally, that's not the case. Same with your W-4, for example. However, if you have an employee who worked 100% remotely and you have not viewed their supporting documents for their I-9 in person, if that law does not get extended, the flexibility extension or whatever it is you want to call, you will be required to review those forms in person and potentially update the I-9 as well to mark that you viewed them in person. So I hope that that helps answer that question. Let's see, we have some more. Is the I-9 required to be filed by the employee or employer on behalf of the employee? Both. There's a section for both the employee and the employer to fill out, but the employer is required to keep that on file for their records. Do you have an executive retirement plan? I am not 100% sure. Let me get back to you on that question. And lastly, how long should we keep the I-9 form? So there are different record retention requirements, and Juanita, feel free to chime in if I answer this incorrectly. I believe the I-9 needs to be kept post-employment, 1 year from the termination date, or 3 years after the hire date, whichever is later, I believe. And I'm happy to follow up on that question to make sure that I said that correctly. Is the harassment prevention training required by, is the harassment training required by law that you offer? I am in Massachusetts. All right, Juanita, I'm going to put you on the spot. Does Massachusetts specifically require harassment prevention?
Hi, can you hear me? I was trying to unmute myself
Yes,
there.
we can hear you.
Okay, so yes, Massachusetts law does require employers to provide a harassment training to new employees, and this is within 1 year of them being hired, but we always recommend you present it at the start of hire as part of their onboarding training completion.
Awesome. Thank you so much for chiming in, Juanita. So yes, if you're in Massachusetts, then it is required. It is included in our service, and it is compliant. So make sure you reach out to us, and we'll talk through that. All right, let me just double check one last time if anybody else has a question. No, it looks like we are good. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us today. Your questions were excellent. Keep them coming. Feel free to shoot us an email. Our email address is on the last slide, and thank you so much for your time. We'll see everybody hopefully in 2 weeks.